40 years ago, nobody expected Beverly Hills Cop to become one of the most successful movies in Hollywood history. At the time, the production looked like a disaster waiting to happen. Paramount Pictures had little confidence in the project. The script kept changing almost every day. Actors were receiving rewritten dialogue between takes, and the director was under constant pressure trying to keep everything together. Even worse, the lead actor who would eventually define the franchise was never supposed to be there in the first place. Today, Beverly Hills Cop is not just another action comedy. It is a cultural phenomenon. Fans still quote the movie decades later. People continue rewatching it endlessly, and Axel Foley remains one of the most recognizable characters ever created. But behind the scenes, the movie was held together by chaos, improvisation, and a series of unbelievable accidents that somehow created magic. What most people never realized is that Beverly Hills Cop almost became a completely different movie. Before Eddie Murphy ever touched the role, the film had already gone through multiple versions. The first major star attached to the project was Mickey Rourke. Back then, the movie was written as a dark and violent action thriller with almost no comedy at all. It looked more like Death Wish than the fast-talking comedy audiences eventually got. Rourke was paid hundreds of thousands of dollars just to stay connected to the project while the studio kept rewriting the script. But after endless development problems, his contract expired and he walked away before filming even started. Then came Sylvester Stallone. And this is where the entire project nearly changed forever. Stallone did not simply join the movie. He completely reshaped it. He rewrote huge portions of the script, removed most of the humor, added bigger action scenes, and pushed the story toward a brutal revenge thriller. The tone became darker, louder, and far more violent. Studios began worrying that the budget was spiraling out of control because Stallone's version required massive explosions and expensive action sequences. Only 2 weeks before filming started, Stallone suddenly left the project. Many of the ideas from his rewrite later appeared in Cobra, the movie he made afterward. At that moment, Beverly Hills Cop was on the edge of collapse. That is when Paramount made the call that changed everything. They reached out to Eddie Murphy, who was only 23 years old at the time but already becoming one of the hottest comedians in America thanks to Saturday Night Live and 48 Hours. But there was one huge problem. The script Murphy received was still built around Stallone's serious action version. It barely contained any humor. Instead of trying to force Murphy into that style, director Martin Brest realized the only way the movie could survive was by letting Murphy completely change the tone himself. So the production took a huge risk. Instead of relying strictly on the script, they leaned heavily into improvisation. Entire scenes were rebuilt around Murphy's energy. Cameras often rolled while nobody on set knew exactly what Axel Foley was about to say next. Judge Reinhold later described the experience as exciting and terrifying at the same time. Actors could not rehearse properly because Murphy constantly invented dialogue in the moment. Their only job was to stay in character and somehow avoid laughing while he transformed scenes in real time. One of the greatest examples is the famous super cop sequence inside the Beverly Hills police station. Most of Murphy's dialogue in that scene was completely improvised. Earlier that day, someone handed him coffee even though he rarely drank caffeine. After taking a few sips, Murphy's energy exploded. He abandoned large portions of the written dialogue and started firing jokes and lines non-stop while the cast struggled to keep up. If you rewatch the scene carefully, you can actually spot the actors trying not to break character. John Ashton visibly fights laughter while Judge Reinhold keeps turning away because he can barely hold himself together. The camera kept rolling because everyone on set realized they were witnessing something special. Even the casting process for some actors was unusual. Martin Brest cared more about chemistry than traditional auditions. When John Ashton and Judge Reinhold auditioned, Brest simply placed them together in a room and told them to talk naturally. The two actors started arguing about random topics and instantly developed the kind of irritated chemistry that later became one of the funniest dynamics in the movie. Their improvised argument inspired the legendary stakeout scene in Beverly Hills Cop. That is why their conversations feel so authentic. They were not performing polished comedy. They genuinely found a rhythm together naturally. Then there was Bronson Pinchot, who played Serge. Originally, Serge was a tiny role with only a few forgettable lines. But Pinchot arrived with an unusual accent, bizarre confidence, and a completely unpredictable personality that instantly made the character unforgettable. Director Martin Brest reportedly realized during the audition that this minor role suddenly had huge comedic potential. Pinchot based Surge partly on someone he had met in real life, exaggerating the person's mannerisms into something hilariously strange. The result became one of the most beloved side characters in the entire franchise. Even decades later, fans still quote Surge's scenes. But maybe the most unbelievable story belongs to director Martin Brest himself. Before Beverly Hills Cop, Brest had been fired from another major movie, War Games. His confidence was damaged, and he was unsure whether he even wanted to direct another difficult studio project. Producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer aggressively pursued him anyway. Unable to decide, Brest flipped a coin. Literally. Heads meant he would direct the movie. Tails meant he would walk away completely. The coin landed on heads. Years later, Brest framed that coin and hung it on his wall because it changed his entire career. But directing Beverly Hills Cop nearly destroyed him. The production moved at an exhausting pace. Script pages changed constantly. Actors received rewritten dialogue moments before scenes were filmed. Nobody fully knew whether the movie was balancing action and comedy correctly. Some days were so stressful that Brest reportedly smoked 7 packs of cigarettes trying to survive production. And somehow, against all odds, the movie exploded into a massive success. Beverly Hills Cop became the highest-grossing movie of 1984. It outperformed huge films like Ghostbusters and Indiana Jones and The Temple of Doom. It also became the first R-rated movie in history to cross $200 million domestically. What looked like a disaster became one of the biggest hits Hollywood had ever seen. One of the movie's most iconic moments also happened entirely by accident. The famous banana in the tailpipe scene was originally supposed to involve potatoes. That was the planned prop. But the production lost access to the kitchen where the potatoes were supposed to come from, leaving the crew scrambling at the last second. Desperate for a replacement, they grabbed bananas from a decorative fruit bowl inside the hotel lobby. That random decision changed movie history. Eddie Murphy improvised the legendary line about the banana in the tailpipe on the spot, turning a production problem into one of the most quoted comedy moments of the entire decade. The movie's origins were equally strange. In the earliest drafts written years before production, Axel Foley was not even from Detroit. The story originally followed a Pittsburgh cop named Axel Ellie. The tone was serious, gritty, and mostly humorless. Over years of rewrites, different writers slowly reshaped the character into the fast-talking Axel Foley audiences eventually loved. Detroit replaced Pittsburgh. Ellie became Foley. The movie evolved from a dark revenge thriller into something funnier, faster, and infinitely more entertaining. Even today, people still argue over who truly created Beverly Hills Cop. Former Paramount president Michael Eisner claimed the idea came after he was pulled over by police in Beverly Hills. Producer Don Simpson insisted the concept belonged entirely to him. Meanwhile, former undercover officer Lynn Franklin believed the movie borrowed heavily from his memoir and even considered taking legal action. That confusion perfectly represents the movie itself. Nothing about Beverly Hills Cop came together cleanly. It was built from competing ideas, last-second decisions, improvisation, accidents, and pure instinct. Years later, Hollywood tried reviving the franchise in television form. CBS developed a Beverly Hills Cop TV series centered on Axel Foley's son. Eddie Murphy appeared in the pilot and served as executive producer. But test audiences reacted so strongly to Murphy that the network wanted him returning regularly. Murphy refused because he had no interest in becoming a side character inside his own franchise. Without him, the project quickly died. Another accidental legacy came from Axel Foley's clothing. The famous Mumford High School sweatshirt Murphy wears throughout the movie was never intended to become iconic. The costume department simply wanted Axel to feel authentic, like a real guy from Detroit. But after the movie became a phenomenon, the real school was flooded with requests from fans across America desperate to buy the sweatshirt. A random wardrobe choice suddenly became a fashion trend. The soundtrack also became legendary. Harold Faltermeyer's Axel F. was an instrumental track released during an era dominated by vocal pop songs. By normal industry standards, it should never have become a major hit. Instead, it reached number 3 on the Billboard charts and became one of the most recognizable movie themes ever created. Songs like The Heat Is On, Neutron Dance, and New Attitude turned the soundtrack into a phenomenon of its own. Beverly Hills Cop did not just dominate theaters. It dominated radio stations too. One of the craziest behind-the-scenes details is hidden directly inside the finished movie. During a scene where Chief Hubbard storms into the police station carrying rolled-up papers, most viewers assume they are police documents. They are not. Those papers were actually the actor's script pages. The dialogue had been rewritten so close to filming that he had no time to memorize anything. Instead of stopping production, he simply carried the script into the scene disguised as paperwork and performed anyway. That single moment perfectly explains how Beverly Hills Cop was made. This movie survived through improvisation, pressure, and people figuring things out second by second. A coin flip hired the director. A random cup of coffee helped create a legendary improv scene. A fruit bowl accidentally created one of the most famous catchphrases in comedy history. A real homicide inspector with no acting experience became one of the movie's most authentic performances. And a simple high school sweatshirt became a pop culture icon. Everything about Beverly Hills Cop should have failed. Instead, it became unforgettable.